Pemberton stood in her perfectly manicured backyard, binoculars pressed against her eyes like a general surveying enemy territory. What she saw through the gap in her privacy fence made her drop her morning coffee, the ceramic mug shattering into 1,000 pieces on her Italian marble patio. The abandoned pool next door, which had been a festering swamp of algae and mosquito larvae for 3 years, was sparkling crystal blue. "This is absolutely unacceptable," she shrieked to no one in particular, her voice carrying across 3 backyards. Mrs. Chen, who was peacefully tending her roses, jumped so violently she nearly fell into her flower bed. Karen's mind raced as she watched her new neighbor, Jake Martinez, emerge from his back door carrying pool equipment. The 20-something had moved in just 2 weeks ago, and already he was destroying everything she'd worked so hard to maintain. That eyesore of a pool had been her secret weapon, the perfect ammunition for her monthly HOA violation reports that kept property values in check and neighbors in line. She marched inside, her designer heels clicking against hardwood like machine gun fire, and snatched her phone from the kitchen counter. Her perfectly manicured fingers flew across the screen as she pulled up the Willowbrook Estates HOA group chat. "Emergency meeting needed," she typed in all caps. "Major violation occurring at 47 Maple Lane. Pool restoration without proper permits. This is exactly why we have rules, people." Within minutes, her phone buzzed with responses. Most were confused questions, but board member Patricia Williams replied with a simple, "Karen, cleaning a pool isn't a violation." Karen's eye twitched, a dangerous sign that her husband Richard had learned to fear over their 22 years of marriage. She speed-dialed Patricia's number, not caring that it was barely 8 a.m. "Patricia, you don't understand," Karen hissed into the phone. "He's completely renovated that disaster zone. New filtration system, fresh concrete work, professional landscaping. I can see $1,000 lounge chairs from here. That sounds nice?" Patricia ventured cautiously. "Nice?" Karen's voice reached a pitch that made neighborhood dogs howl. "Do you have any idea what this does to my property value arguments? I spent 3 years documenting that pool as a hazard. I have 17 separate violation reports, citing it as proof of declining neighborhood standards." She hung up and stormed to her home office, where color-coded binders lined the walls like trophies. Each contained meticulously documented HOA violations, complete with time-stamped photos and legal precedents. The thick binder labeled 47 Maple Lane was her masterpiece, a symphony of complaints that had kept the previous owners so miserable they'd finally sold at a loss. But now Jake Martinez had waltzed in and destroyed months of careful work in just 2 weeks. Karen pulled out her laptop and began typing furiously, crafting an email that would make the newcomer understand exactly who controlled this neighborhood. As she wrote, one thought consumed her. This wasn't just about a pool. This was about power, control, and proving that Karen Pemberton's rule over Willowbrook Estates was absolute. Jake Martinez had just declared war, and he had no idea who he was fighting. Jake Martinez was installing underwater LED lights when Karen's shadow fell across his pool deck. He looked up to find a woman in a pristine white pantsuit standing at his back gate, clipboard in hand and lips pursed so tightly they'd practically disappeared. "Mr. Martinez, I presume?" Karen's voice dripped with false politeness. "I'm Karen Pemberton, HOA president. We need to discuss your project." Jake straightened up, wiping his hands on a towel. "Oh hey, you must be my neighbor. I've been meaning to introduce myself. Pretty crazy how this old pool cleaned up, right? Previous owners really let it go." Karen's eye twitched as she stepped uninvited onto his property. "That's exactly what I'm here about. I have documentation proving this pool has been a safety hazard for 3 years. Suddenly it's magazine ready? I think we both know what's really happening here." "Yeah, I worked my ass off for 2 weeks straight," Jake laughed, completely missing the accusation in her tone. "Cost me about 8 grand, but totally worth it. Want to see the before photos?" "What I want to see are your permits," Karen snapped, her mask of civility cracking. "Pool renovation requires city approval, contractor licensing verification, and HOA architectural review. You've done none of these. Jake's smile faded. Permits. Lady, I cleaned a pool and fixed some broken tiles. I didn't build the damn thing. Don't you lady me, young man. I am the elected representative of 47 homeowners who depend on me to maintain our property values. Karen's voice rose with each word. Your little renovation project threatens everything we've built here. She thrust a manila envelope at him. Cease and desist order. You have 48 hours to return this pool to its original condition or face legal action. Jake stared at the document like it was written in hieroglyphics. You want me to make my pool gross again? I want you to follow the rules like everyone else. Karen turned on her heel, then paused. Oh, and Mr. Martinez? That sound system you installed violates noise ordinances. The underwater lighting violates light pollution codes, and those lounge chairs are positioned 6 inches into the property's setback zone. As she click-clacked away, Jake called after her, How the hell do you know about my lounge chairs? Karen didn't answer, but her smile would have made a shark nervous. Back in her office, she opened a new binder labeled Martinez War File and began documenting everything she'd observed. Pool dimensions, equipment specifications, even the brand of chlorine he used. Her phone rang. Richard's face appeared on the screen, calling from his business trip in Denver. Honey, I got 17 missed calls from you. Everything okay? Richard, I need you to call your lawyer friend. We're about to sue our new neighbor into bankruptcy. A long pause. Karen, what did you do? I'm protecting our investment. This Martinez character has completely renovated that disaster pool without a single permit. He's openly mocking our authority. Maybe he's just trying to be a good neighbor. Karen's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. Good neighbors follow rules, Richard. Bad neighbors get destroyed. She hung up and returned to her computer, pulling up property records, city databases, and contractor licensing boards. If Jake Martinez thought he could waltz into her neighborhood and ignore her authority, he was about to learn a very expensive lesson. But as she worked, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered something that made her stomach clench. What if she was wrong? What if he really had just cleaned an old pool? She silenced the voice with another gulp of wine and kept typing. Doubt was weakness, and Karen Pemberton was many things, but weak wasn't one of them. Change, loss of control, the neighborhood becoming something you didn't recognize. Jake handed her the envelope. I get it. Change is terrifying. But here's the thing. Fighting it just makes you miserable. That night, Karen sat in her backyard reading through her own documentation of Jake's violations. Page after page of detailed observations, time-stamped photographs, and legal research. The work of someone desperate to maintain control over an uncontrollable world. She thought about the therapy sessions, about Richard's patient support, about the genuine kindness in Jake's eyes when he'd handed her the envelope. Recovery wasn't going to be simple or quick, but maybe, just maybe, it was possible. As she prepared to burn the entire envelope in their fire pit, one final document caught her eye. A letter from the city, dated 6 months ago, informing the HOA that new noise ordinances would be implemented due to excessive complaints from a single address. Karen stared at the paper, realizing that her crusade for neighborhood standards had literally changed city law. The unresolved question that would haunt her moving forward wasn't whether she could change. It was whether the damage she'd done over 20 years could ever be fully undone. But for tonight, watching the papers burn under the stars while Richard grilled burgers and their neighbors' distant laughter drifted over the fence, it was enough to know that tomorrow could be different. Even if she wasn't sure she deserved it yet. Richard, she said slowly, what if I've been wrong about everything? Part 5. The Reckoning. 2 months after her resignation, Karen stood at her kitchen window watching Jake Martinez host his first neighborhood pool party. Half of Willowbrook Estates was in his backyard, including several families who'd once been on her violation list. Children splashed in the sparkling water while parents laughed and shared food. She'd been invited. The handwritten note had appeared in her mailbox 3 days ago. Dr. Pemberton, it would mean a lot if you join us. Jake and Sarah. Richard emerged from his study, wearing swim trunks for the first time in years. You sure you don't want to come? Tom Walsh is bringing his famous barbecue ribs. Karen touched the window glass, watching Sandra Chen's twin daughters shriek with delight as they jumped into the deep end. When was the last time she'd heard children's laughter in this neighborhood instead of complaints about noise violations? "I can't," she whispered. "They hate me. They hate what you did, not who you are." Richard's reflection appeared beside hers in the window. "There's a difference." 3 weeks earlier, Karen had done something that terrified her more than any HOA confrontation. She'd started therapy. Dr. Martinez, no relation to Jake, was a patient woman who specialized in anxiety disorders and control issues. "When did keeping your neighborhood safe become about keeping your neighbors in line?" she'd asked during their last session. Karen had cried for 20 minutes trying to answer that question. Now, watching the party continue without her, she made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. She changed into the sundress Richard had bought her for their anniversary, the one she'd never worn because it was too casual for neighborhood meetings, and walked outside. The conversation at Jake's back gate died when she appeared. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward her, and Karen felt every mistake she'd made over the past 2 decades sitting heavy on her shoulders. She started, then stopped. Public speaking had never been hard for her before, but those had been speeches about violations and property values. This was different. Jake appeared at her elbow, having somehow crossed the yard without her noticing. "I'm glad you came," he said quietly. "I want to apologize," Karen announced to the crowd. "To all of you. I spent so many years thinking I was protecting this place that I forgot it's not the houses that make a neighborhood. It's the people." The silence stretched uncomfortably. Then Patricia Williams started clapping, slowly at first, then joined by others until the entire party was applauding. "Does this mean you're not going to report me for my garden gnomes?" called out Mrs. Rodriguez, grinning. Karen laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months. "I'll make you a deal. I'll stop reporting garden gnomes if you'll teach me how to make your tamales." As the afternoon wore on, Karen found herself in conversations she hadn't had in years, not about violations or property values, but about Bob Henderson's new grandchild, Sandra Chen's promotion at work, and Tom Walsh's plans to expand his hardware store. But it was Jake who surprised her most. As the party wound down and neighbors began heading home, he approached her with a manila envelope. "What's this?" Karen asked, recognizing her own handwriting on the address label. "Every complaint you filed about my pool, every violation report, every photo, every official document." Jake's expression was serious. "I had to request copies for my insurance company. Took me 3 hours to read through everything." Karen's face flushed with shame. "Jake, No, let me finish. Reading all this, I realized something. You weren't just being mean or petty. You were scared." The observation hit her like a physical blow. Scared of what? Karen's hands shook as she stared at the official letter from the city building department. After 3 weeks of her relentless complaints, they'd finally sent an inspector to Jake's property. The results weren't what she'd expected. All pool maintenance and minor repairs found to be within compliance. She read aloud in her empty kitchen. "No permits required for work performed. Complainant advised that future frivolous reports may result in filing fees." The letter slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the marble floor. Frivolous. They called her reports frivolous. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Williams. "Karen, we need to talk. Emergency board meeting tonight. 7 p.m. Karen knew that tone. She'd used it herself when firing previous HOA presidents who'd overstepped their bounds. But this was different. She was protecting the neighborhood, maintaining standards. Couldn't they see that? The community center felt hostile when she walked in that evening. Only 3 of the 5 board members were present: Patricia, Tom Walsh, and newcomer Sandra Chen, who joined the board just to oppose Karen's aggressive tactics. "Karen, sit down," Patricia said softly. "We've been getting calls. Complaints about my methods, I suppose? People don't like having standards enforced." "No," Tom interrupted. "Complaints about harassment. The Hendersons are considering moving because you've been documenting their daily activities. Mrs. Rodriguez found you photographing her backyard through her fence. And yesterday, Jake Martinez's girlfriend caught you going through his garbage. Karen's face flushed. I was investigating potential environmental violations. Pool chemicals require proper disposal. You were acting like a stalker, Sandra said bluntly. 3 families have threatened legal action against the HOA because of your behavior. Our insurance company is demanding we distance ourselves from your methods. The room fell silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Karen felt something cracking inside her chest, not her heart, but her certainty. The absolute conviction that had carried her through 20 years of neighborhood management was developing hairline fractures. So that's it, she whispered. 20 years of keeping this place respectable, and you're going to throw me away for one troublemaker? Karen. Patricia's voice was gentle. When's the last time you enjoyed living here? When's the last time you saw neighbors as people instead of potential violations? The question hit Karen like a physical blow. She tried to remember, tried to think of a single moment in recent years when she felt happiness instead of vigilant anxiety. The memory wouldn't come. I resign, she said suddenly, surprising herself. Karen, you don't have to. No, I do. She stood up, legs unsteady. You want a neighborhood where people can do whatever they want? Where standards don't matter? Fine. You've got it. She walked out into the parking lot, where Jake Martinez was waiting by her car. Karen tensed, expecting confrontation, but his expression was almost concerned. Dr. Pemberton, I heard about the meeting. Look, I never wanted you to lose your position. Don't, Karen said sharply. Don't pretend to care. I'm not pretending. Jake stepped closer, and Karen noticed he looked tired. My girlfriend thinks I should be angrier, but honestly, you remind me of my mom. She ran our neighborhood association for 15 years. Same energy, same intensity. What happened to her? Burnout, high blood pressure. She realized she'd been so busy protecting the neighborhood that she'd forgotten how to live in it. Karen stared at this young man, who'd been her enemy for weeks, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Your pool really did just need cleaning, didn't it? Jake smiled sadly. Yeah, just needed cleaning. As Karen drove home, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she needed cleaning too. But the thought of starting over at 58, of admitting she'd been wrong about so many things for so many years, felt more terrifying than any HOA violation she'd ever documented. At home, she found Richard waiting in the kitchen, back early from his business trip. On the counter sat a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Heard you had a rough day, he said gently. Karen looked at her husband, really looked at him, and realized she couldn't remember the last time they'd shared a bottle of wine without her spending the entire evening complaining about neighbors. The emergency HOA meeting was standing room only, which was saying something since Karen had only given 12 hours notice. She stood at the front of the Willowbrook Community Center, laser pointer in hand, facing a room full of confused neighbors clutching coffee cups and looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. As you can see in slide 4, Karen clicked to a blown-up photo of Jake's pool. The defendant has completely altered the structural integrity of his property without proper oversight. Karen, interrupted Bob Henderson, a retired teacher who lived 3 streets over. It's just a clean pool. My kids used to swim in that swamp when the Johnsons lived there. This is actually an improvement. The room murmured agreement, which made Karen's left eye start its familiar twitch. Bob, with all due respect, you don't understand property law. This isn't about whether it looks nice. This is about precedent. Jake Martinez stood up from the back row, having been dragged there by his girlfriend Sarah. Look, I'm sorry if I caused problems. I'm new to the HOA thing. If I need permits for maintenance, just tell me where to get them. Maintenance? Karen's voice cracked like a whip. Sir, you installed a $40,000 filtration system. It cost $800 from Home Depot. Jake shot back. And I have receipts. The room fell silent. Karen felt her carefully constructed argument crumbling, but desperation made her double down. That's impossible. I have contractor estimates proving this renovation cost minimum $40,000. Sarah, Jake's girlfriend, stood up beside him. Karen, right? I'm an architect. Jake sent me photos of his work. He literally just cleaned the pool and replaced some broken tiles. Maybe $2,000 in materials, tops. That's Dr. Pemberton to you. Karen snapped, then immediately regretted it as several neighbors rolled their eyes. And I have photographic evidence of massive structural changes. She clicked frantically through her slideshow, landing on a photo of Jake's pool equipment. Exhibit C, industrial-grade pumps and heating systems that clearly violate residential codes. Tom Walsh, who owned the hardware store in town, squinted at the projection. Karen, that's a basic pool pump. I sell dozens of them every summer. Retails for about $300. The room erupted in whispers. Karen felt control slipping away like water through her fingers. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. These people were supposed to trust her judgment, support her authority. You're all missing the point, she shouted over the murmur. Rules exist for a reason. Today, it's an unpermitted pool renovation. Tomorrow it's pink houses and backyard chickens, and property values in free fall. Patricia Williams, her own board member, stood up slowly. Karen, I think maybe you should apologize to Mr. Martinez. This has gotten out of hand. The word apologize hit Karen like a physical blow. She looked around the room at faces that had once hung on her at every word, now staring at her with something approaching pity. Jake Martinez sat there with his stupid honest face, probably thinking he'd won. Fine, Karen said, her voice deadly quiet. If this is how you want to play it, then we'll play it legally. Mr. Martinez, expect a formal complaint to be filed with the city tomorrow morning. When your insurance premiums skyrocket and your property taxes triple because of unpermitted improvements, don't come crying to me. She gathered her materials and stalked out, leaving behind a room full of uncomfortable neighbors. But Karen's real mistake wasn't the public humiliation. It was that she'd just made an enemy of every single person in that room. Back home, she poured herself a large glass of wine and opened her laptop. If the HOA wouldn't support her, she'd go over their heads. City Building Department, County Health Inspector, State Environmental Agency. She knew people in all these offices. Jake Martinez thought he'd won tonight, but Karen Pemberton was just getting started.